What is up, ladies and gentlemen? But most of all, you ladies out there, thanks for clicking on another episode of Break the Silence. I am your host, Cyborg. Ja Morant is him. Let's talk about it. Split cow! We just watched Ja Morant, the Ja Morant, drop 49 points against the Houston Rockets, and it was an unbelievable performance. He wanted to remind you all out there of who he was. You know, this should really be an insult to you. Ja thought you were dumb and thought you forgot. Ja needed to remind you of who he was, and boy, oh boy, did he tonight. Ja Morant gave you 49 points in only 31 minutes of action against the Houston Rockets in an excellent basketball game. We're going to talk about that for a little bit. We're going to talk about the Grizzlies, touch on the Rockets a little bit, and we're going to touch on a couple games that happened tonight. Obviously, I have a limited amount of games that I can watch at one time, so we've kind of limited that to 3 at the moment. Otherwise, it's kind of hard to focus on what's going on in all of them. So I will get to your favorite basketball team. So trust me on that. I'm going to talk about all the NBA teams. We've hit on a ton already. Tonight, we're going to spend some time talking about Memphis and the Rockets. A couple other games we were looking at. The Celtics and the Miami Heat played. Reminded you of last year's Eastern Conference Finals. The Celtics looked great. Their wins over the Sixers and the Miami Heat, great way to start the season for Boston. Miami 0-2 to start the season. They were one of the teams that I predicted for a little drop-off, so keep that in mind. Other game that I kind of had my eye on was the Minnesota Timberwolves against the Utah Jazz. I really wanted to watch the spacing and the offense that Minnesota ran with both Rudy Gobert and Karl Towns on the floor at the same time. I'm going to touch on that for a second because I thought that game was really interesting as well. But first, before we get into it all, please take a second to like and subscribe to the channel. You see, we're on the road for 500 subscribers, and I can't wait to get there. Appreciate all the support. Appreciate y'all watching. So let's start with that game a little bit before we get into Ja, because we're going to spend some real time talking about Ja Morant, the Grizzlies. And I also want to talk about Jalen Green because he played a heck of a game tonight there for the Houston Rockets and what they're building over there in Houston as a nice young squad. So the Minnesota Timberwolves actually lost tonight to the Utah Jazz. And the Minnesota Timberwolves were a team that we all really liked. And let me get pulled up here while I'm talking. But they were a team that we liked as they made a trade for Rudy Gobert in the offseason. Now, they did get rid of some of their depth in that trade. And in fact, a lot of their depth was on that Utah team that they lost to tonight. The interesting thing when you're watching the Minnesota Timberwolves is the way that they played offense to start the game. They have D'Angelo Russell running the point primarily. He would dribble up the court, and then Gobert and Karl Towns would kind of come on each side of him and be prepared to set a screen, where D'Angelo Russell would then would run off of one of them and then make a play from there. And it was really, really interesting to watch because we haven't had a lot of time watching a two-center kind of team. It just doesn't really exist in the NBA. The last one we saw maybe was the Boogie Cousins, Anthony Davis, but that didn't last very long. And Anthony Davis is a little more of a 4, where Cat and Gobert have played 5 for their whole career. Now, the reason that this kind of works when you're talking offensively is Karl Towns' ability to shoot the 3 ball. As far as centers go, he's an elite 3-point shooter. So this offense was really dynamic, I thought, at the beginning of the game. And then Anthony Edwards is someone who I think is a top 20 player in the NBA, and I think he'll cement himself there this season. He gave you, I believe, 30 tonight. Let me look. Yeah, he gave you 30 tonight. But there were a couple issues when you are looking at this Timberwolves squad that we had kind of worried about. Their perimeter defense seemed very poor. The Jazz shot 40% from 3, and obviously that's kind of what the Jazz want to do. They want to shoot the 3 ball well. They have pretty much 5 guys on the court at all times that can shoot the 3 ball. So That's the concern. When you have Rudy Gobert and Karl Anthony Towns, the problem I saw a lot was any time that they had to make a closeout, they're kind of slow getting out there. A lot of times the Jazz player would pump and then take it to the basket, and then the rest of the Timberwolves are in rotation. It's leading to wide open shots all over the court all night for the Utah Jazz. So really interesting to watch the Timberwolves defensive scheme and their offensive scheme as the season progresses. Now, this is one of those experiments. It's a chemistry experiment to see, can you have two centers playing on one team at the same time, or are they going to have to rotate their minutes more? Are they going to have to, what are they going to do to make this work in Minnesota? So that's one of the teams that we're really looking forward to watching. Plus, Anthony Edwards is just a dog. Guys, super, super fun to watch. One of my favorite players in the NBA to watch. But Rudy Gobert, you got the good and the bad from him tonight. He gave you 9 points. I'm just always blown away by how limited he is offensively. He's obviously so incredible defensively and had 23 rebounds tonight. But offensively, I don't ask for much when it comes to Rudy Gobert because of all he does and everywhere else. But when he gets a mismatch on a little guy on the court, can he please post up a guard? That's all I ask. You don't need to be Hakeem Olajuwon in the paint, but can you, when you get a little switch onto a little guard, can you please post him up? And Rudy Gobert has not developed that yet, and it drives me bonkers. But let's move on from that game. We're going to get a little more into the Timberwolves going, as we go forward in the season. I want to watch more of them, and we'll do more in-depth analysis. But let me switch over here to this Memphis and Houston game, because Ja Morant tonight have 49 points. And there was one clear thing that stood out. His three-point shooting in the first two games has been incredible. He shot 3 of 6 the other night in New York when he had a clutch bucket to win that game. And then tonight shot 5 of 6 from 3. And they needed every one of those 49 points to beat the Houston Rockets, who were playing fantastic tonight too. So Ja Morant, start to the season, is a guy that came out on a mission trying to win MVP. Now the thing about the Grizzlies that's so wild is in the late 2008-ish, when they had Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, Mike Conley, they had all these slow Tony Allen, slow defensive players that grabbed rebounds, would just bang on you all night. And they had all these guys that would just, the game was so slow and it was so rugged, and it was almost boring to watch, even though, as a basketball fan, they were very good, but it was almost like a boring brand of basketball to watch at times. And now Ja Morant has turned the Grizzlies into one of the most must-watch teams in the NBA. It is really unbelievable how incredible this man is at basketball and how box office he has become. Because every night, he not only plays with everything he's got, statistically he's incredible, the way that he passes the ball is incredible, and even though he had 49 points tonight, the best play he made was actually a block. And if you want to go look that up, it was incredible. I believe Jalen Green was driving down the court, and Ja Morant jumped up and blocked it from so high up. And you always just watch Ja, and you're like, he looks like he's not that big, but he can just jump out of the gym. And Ja Morant's unbelievable. But when you're looking at this Grizzlies squad, I am a little concerned of how close they've been in these first two games with kind of mediocre teams. I kind of thought the Grizzlies might take a little bit of a step back this year as far as when you're talking about seeding, because you look, unfortunately, at the Western, or not unfortunately, but unfortunately for the Grizzlies, but the rest of the Western Conference seems to be improved. Now, we'll see if that's the case, but then Jaren Jackson, unfortunately, is out for most of the start of the season here. So can the Grizzlies get past this point before they get their, second star there in Jaren Jackson? They've added a couple nice pieces. They have a shooter named Conchar. I forget his first name. Desmond Bane is a very good player. And then they have a rookie, I believe he's a rookie, Aldama, who played good the other night and played all right tonight. But this Grizzlies squad is really, really fun to watch. And it all starts with Ja Morant, and they just kind of let him do his thing. Let's move on for a second here to the Houston Rockets, because this is a squad that I'm very excited about going forward. Jabari Smith, their rookie that they drafted, I believe out of Auburn, was one of my favorite players in the draft. Actually, second probably to Jaden Ivey as far as just like guys that I was looking forward to watch. Now, Paolo Banchero is incredible, so I might have been wrong on that, but Jabari Smith, I was really excited to watch. He really struggled tonight, was 3 of 14. But Jalen Green, second-year player, was pick number 2 last year after Cade Cunningham, was one of those guys that was one of those guards that were elite at scoring. And you really wanted to see him develop that this year because he was wildly inefficient last year, was inconsistent. Can he come into this season and can he take that step forward? Now, tonight he gave you 33 points. That's a performance. If we're getting those kinds of performances from Jalen Green, you're talking about taking that next step into being a very good player in the NBA. And then we'll start talking about, can he make the All-Star game? Can he lead his team to the playoffs, things of that nature. And as the Houston Rockets continue to build and maybe even, are in that Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, can the Rockets be one of those teams that are really good in 3 years? Because they've got a ton of young talent. And if you're a Rockets fan, I'd be pretty encouraged from what I'm seeing because Jabari Smith will get his footing. Kevin Porter Jr., obviously, I think they just signed him to a contract, and Jalen Green played well. And Sengun, off the bench, played really excellent for the Rockets tonight. So, a lot to look forward to when you're talking about young players in this league. Ja Morant almost reminds me of he's so similar to D Rose to me. And honestly, D Rose won an MVP. Wouldn't surprise me if in the next couple years that Ja Morant won an MVP. If his team is competing for one of the top seeds in the West and he's balling out, especially without Jaren Jackson, definitely will be in the MVP talks. The only thing you worry about with these really explosive guards, the Derrick Roses, the Russell Westbrooks, is injury. Can your body hold up? Is it meant to be that explosive at that size? So we hope so with Ja Morant. Every year he's kind of sustained a little ankle tweak or things of that nature. So I'm really looking forward to watching more of the Grizzlies this year. We got a ton more basketball to watch, a ton more basketball to talk about. Appreciate y'all watching. Cyborg out.